Shalom Aleichem, a good night of Shabbos. Yesterday was Rosh Chodesh Shvat, so we're in the Shvat mode. And when we remind ourselves about Shvat, we remind ourselves of this very special day, Yud Shvat. First the Stalkus, the yahrzeit of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and then of course the day Yud Shvat 1951 when the Rebbe, our Rebbe, became our Rebbe. So there's a lot to talk about, and in particular I want to talk a little bit about my new book that came out this last week, Chabad and Boyan, Klausenberg, Skwere and Stolin, and a second book, Chabad and Telz. On the cover there's the Rebbe and Rabbi Gifter, Mordechai Gifter, who was the Rosh Hashiva for years at Telz in Cleveland. I want to talk about a few just ideas how the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe made an impact on these Rebbes and on these Gedolim, on this Gadol, and to understand that although sometimes we don't see it, and we don't hear it. On the contrary, we hear that they're not friends of Lubavitch and Chabad, but really, there's a lot more than what meets the eye. So let's talk about the Klausenberg Rebbe briefly. And the Klausenberg Rebbe hired a Lubavitcher to be the principal of his girls' school. This is Rabbi Mordechai Scheiner, so Gesund, who lives in Borough Park. He's still the principal, and he was there for years, many, many years. And he told me many stories of which are in the book. And basically, when his menahel, his administrator, said, "We have an application from a Lubavitcher, and is this something that you want for your girls' school?" He said, "If he'll be smart, he'll know how to balance the two," and indeed he did. And the Klausenberg Rebbe was very, very happy that a Lubavitcher was the principal of his girls' school. The Klausenberg Rebbe, his health at certain points weren't good, and he was in Houston, and the shliach there, Rabbi Lazarov, so sein gesund, had hoiros, had instructions from Rabbi Chadakov, the Rebbe, how to take care of him. And then the Rebbe, I think, every day would ask Chadakov to call up and find out how he's doing. So there was an ongoing relationship. Also, we see that both the Rebbe and the Klausenberg Rebbe passed away, I believe, in the same week or week or two, in Tafshin Nun Daled, which is interesting, So on one hand, Klausenberg is a Hungarian Hasidic group, but there was commonality in various ways. Also, the Rashi, the Rebbe was very interested and taught how to learn Rashi, Pshuto Shel Mikra. The Klausenberg Rebbe every Thursday night would give a drasha, would give on the Parsha, and people would come in Union City, New Jersey, and people would come from Williamsburg and Borough Park with a bus. And it was, I think, an hour and a half or so, an amazing shiur, I was told. And a large part of that focus of the shiur was Rashi as well. He didn't learn and teach the Rashi the way the Rebbe taught the Rashi. It was two different approaches. But nevertheless, it was also focusing on Rashi. And the Rebbe, when Rebbe Binyamin Williger was in Yechidus, the Rebbe asked him about it. He says, I hear, the Rebbe said, I hear that your Rebbe, used a shiur Rashi. Could you tell me about it? And things like that. So there was a shared interest. Also, I was told that to Farbrengens in the early days, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, many Klausenberg Hasidim came to Farbrengens. So if you compare, Klausenberg to other Hasidic groups in Williamsburg and Borough Park, etc., there were more Klausenberg Hasidim at Farbrengens than other Hasidim. And then, of course, we have the Boyan Rebbe in this book, and we have the Skwere Rebbe and the Stolin Rebbe. The Rebbe single-handedly pushed the Boyan Rebbe to become a Rebbe. He didn't want. He said he's too young. The Geraris, Reb Zalman Gerari, is a Eidim, a son-in-law by the Kapistitzer Rebbe, who's related to the Boyan Rebbe. And through Reb Zalman, I believe, the Rebbe, asked him to encourage the Boyan Rebbe to become Rebbe. In 1980, I think, before he married, he was in New York, although he married, I believe, in Yerushalayim. A few months before, he was in New York, and people saw him go into Yechidus with the Rebbe quietly, unannounced, things like that. And we know that there's a strong connection between the holy great-great-grandfather of the Boyaner, the Ruzhner, Rebbe Yisrael Ruzhner, the Heilige Ruzhner, that Tzemach Tzedek have said to have called him the Heilige Ruzhner, and the Tzemach Tzedek. Although really this is in Belarusia, and this is in Romania, that part of Europe, and it's very far from each other, and it really, the approaches of Boyan in Hasidus and Chabad are very, very different. But clearly, from the time of the Tzemach Tzedek and the Ruzhner, there was an affinity between them, and that continued for generations. And the Rebbe felt this way too. When we talk about the Stolin Rebbe, who was known as the Yenuka, became a Rebbe at a very young age, he also has a great affinity and love for Lubavitch and the Rebbe. Again, although historically there was a big chilukei deis, there was a very different opinion between Stolin, the Karliner, and Chabad. Karliner, the emotionalism, the screaming during davening and all that, and Chabad is quiet and introspective type contemplative prayer versus emotional and ecstatic prayer. So there are major differences. Nevertheless, in our time, the Stolin Rebbe and the Rebbe have enjoyed a closeness. In fact, the Rebbe called him a Nasi. So people make a big deal about that, and it is a big deal for someone to be called a Nasi. So a prince, a leader of a whole Hasidus, being called a Nasi, we know from our Rebbe calling his father-in-law the Nasi, we know how important, what that means, and everything else that goes along with it. Finally, we have the Skwere Rebbe. And in the Skwere Rebbe, I wrote quite a bit about the holy Baal Shem Tov Siddur, which was very controversial for years. But today it's settled. We have the legal documents, and I shared some of that in the book, showing that there was a legal sale by a Skwere Chassid to the Frierdiker Rebbe's representative. And as you all know, the Siddur is in the library as we talk now. It's in our Chabad library at 770. Skwere, again, is a very different type of Hasidus. It is a Russian Hasidus. There are 4 Russian Hasidus, right? Breslev, Chernobyl, Karlin Stolin, and Lubavitch. And each is very different. The 3 are very different than Chabad, and even amongst themselves, there's differences, those 3 groups. But The Skwere Rebbe has been a Rebbe since 1968 when his father passed away. And he's done amazing, amazing things. He's built an entire Chassidus, not only in New Square. He was the first of the Rebbes that went away from the Brooklyn hub, Williamsburg of Borough Park, and opened up a Chassidus in Rockland County. And he wanted to be away from the tumult of New York, and he was able to implement various customs that he felt are important, and it thrives. And there are yeshivas and girls' schools and boys' schools and batim midrashim and mikvahs. And this is a new square. In addition to that, we have various Skwere Shtiblich here in Borough Park. And of course, today's mikveh on Kingston Avenue in the Rabbi Levi Shul is upstairs. Rabbi Donya Levi Shul. Downstairs is the mikveh. That building, I believe, was the Skwere Shtibel. And then you have it in other communities too, here in America and also in Eretz Yisrael, in England and Montreal. So the movement is a thriving movement, an active movement that has many moises, many institutions, and we enjoy a nice, warm relationship with Skwere today. When we talk about Rabbi Gifter and Telz, it really needs a full program for itself, and in Mitzvah Hashem we will do that. But just since we mentioned the book, briefly, Rabbi Gifter in the 1940s had a question on a Tzemach Tzedek, something in the Shas Shuvas Tzemach Tzedek, and he couldn't find it, and he wrote to the Rebbe. I think this is in the 40s or 50s, and there's a response, and he said this over to several people, Litvisha people who told me this, who were in the Cleveland Telz Yeshiva or the Kollel over there, and he said the Rebbe on the spot gave him the exact reference where it is in the Shas Shuvas Tzemach Tzedek. And Rabbi Gifter always said the Rebbe is a goin in learning. He had some disagreements with him on other issues, how to approach communal issues and, the mivtzoyim, the outreach. He wasn't a great fan of that, at least some of them, and how they were done, but so be it, He's entitled to his